All right, hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today we have the commander decks from the Kaldheim expansion to unbox. So the first one we're going to look at is called Phantom Premonition. As you can see, it is a blue-white deck and it features Raynar the Ever Watchful. So it's based around the foretell mechanic from the set. Now flipping over the back of the box, we can see that it is a 100-card deck, as all commander decks are, and it features 8 new cards. Looks like a cardboard deck box, 10 double-sided tokens, life wheel, strategy insert, and reference card. So let's crack this open and see what we get inside. Now, one thing that's nice about this one, and I think it's the reason why I think it's probably the better one if you were to introduce somebody new to commander, is because it's based on the foretell mechanic, which of course is been introduced in Kaldheim for the first time. So meaning that it is a mechanic that you don't need to go get a bunch of other expansions to add to your deck. Everything, you know, you can give them some more packs and there's hopefully some more foretell cards in there. So it's nice that it's all included in this set. So it doesn't necessarily require a lot of other cards, which is always nice when you're introducing somebody to Magic. Not having to go run out and explain how the set works from all other cards work with different sets from a long time ago and things like that. So as we take off plastic here, we can see we have our foil card built around mechanic foretell. We have our deck here, and we have here's our deck box. So again, I'm not the biggest fan of these. To be honest, I usually just throw these in the recycling. They're nice if you're new and very easily folds together to make your deck box. But obviously not something that you need once you're more enfranchised player. These are kind of cool though. I mean, they are cardboard, but they are pretty stiff, and it does allow you to track your life total quite easily. I used to like the plastic ones they gave out years ago, thinking around the time of like Morwin, Shadowmoor, Time Spiral. You get them at some premier events like locally, and they would kind of be more of a harder plastic, and they worked kind of like this where you could spin them down. And I still use those to this day. So that I think is a pretty good idea to include. And then of course you have the guide, and the guide is excellent for new players, especially because it kind of goes over sort of some of the ways the mechanic works and some of the basics. Now this one doesn't seem to have as much. They usually have a little bit more information, so these ones seem like they've been pared down a little bit, but nonetheless, as a new player, I'm sure you appreciate having any kind of information, especially if you're just picking this up on your own, hoping to play with some friends that are maybe have their own commander decks already in place and you want to pick up one and play. Now I will say they have done a much better job than the past of making these kind of playable right out of the box, which is something that I think everyone can appreciate. It's no fun going to play with a bunch of friends and then finding out your deck is nowhere near strong enough to compete. Even in a casual setting, you want to have fun, you want to be able to enjoy yourselves, and if you can't do that, then you're not having fun, you're not going to want to play again. So okay, we've already featured this card, but I just want to go over that this is very similar to one of the creatures that was featured in one of the commander decks in Ikoria, and that is based around the set mechanic, which I think again is a great way to make a commander deck, right? Because it's easy to build around, and there's always a lot of cards too that are older that maybe work with the mechanic, even if it's not potentially named. So I'm going to go through the deck now and show you some of the cards that are included and kind of talk about them and maybe mention some of the ones that I think are important. So first off, we have Banishing Light, which has been reprinted many times now. Usually with this artwork, so that's a good staple card. Cloud Goat Ranger, again, another classic card, so I think that's a great inclusion in this deck. We have a Devotion card, so that's an old one from Theros. Flicker Wisp, which is good, just a good utility card, letting you exile permanents. Then we have Ghostly Prison with new art. So this one's interesting in that it protects you, but then it can also make you the target if people find you kind of annoying. Gold Knight Commander is another reprint. So just a good one that allows you to pump your creatures. Court Cartographer isn't necessarily going to be one of the fanciest, more attractive cards in the deck, but it's one of those kind of glue cards because it allows you to search out a planes and put in the battlefield tap. So it gives you a body to potentially block with, maybe pressure a planeswalker, while also giving you the chance to block as well, while accelerating your mana base. So Momentary Blink is a card I loved back in Time Spiral when it was originally printed. Now back then it was a little bit better because you could put things like damage on the stack and then blink out the creature to prevent them from dying. So not quite as abusive now as it was then, But with plenty of cards, even like Core Cartographer, which we just saw, the ability to blink out your creature, you know, even if you block with it and then blink it, is still awesome. And the fact that you get 2 uses out of this effect with it having flashback is great. Return to Dust is a commander staple. Just a great way to potentially get rid of 2 annoying artifacts or enchantments. Wall of Omens is another great blocker, and it draws you a card. Ghostly Flicker, so this is another momentary blink style card. So you can really see the way they built this deck is based around getting your creatures into play, getting their effect, so they're like a spell-like effect, and then taking advantage of it again by blinking it out and being able to have it come into play. So another great card like this is Mist Raven. So because it allows you to bounce something back to its owner's hand. So you can play it, attack a few times, and then bounce it if they're going to kill it, or if you just want to get the effect again. Muldrifter is always, of course, a staple of this strategy because it does allow you to draw 2 cards. And in the early game, it's useful because you can just evoke it, and then with the ability on the stack, you can blink it out. That way, you don't have to pay the full cost if you wanted to. Generally speaking, though, the ability to blink is more expensive, so it's not something that is probably the best idea, but it's a cool thing you can do. If you have something on board, maybe that's cheaper to do. Seagate Oracle is similar to Muldrifter in that they allow you to draw cards. In this case, you get a little bit of card selection. Whirler Rogue is a great finisher in a lot of decks because it allows you to make a creature unblockable for the turn. And the nice thing about it too is it gives you the artifacts you can use, and you can use the effect right away. So you can play it, tap your 2 Thopter tokens, give a creature unblockable, maybe swing in for the kill. Or if you just need 3 bodies, right? It gives you a lot of bodies for 4 mana. So next we have Windfall. So this is a card that was originally printed in Urza Saga and is quite broken in certain decks. Now, in a more friendly environment, such as Commander, I don't think people are necessarily going to be abusing it all that much. Hopefully not. But I'm sure there's, you know, some ways which you can do that. You think of some of the cards like Narset, you know, prevent your opponents from drawing cards that can really hamper them. But I think in this context, it's more about just drawing cards, filling up your hand. Now we have Cloud Blazer, which is another Muldrifter variant. So this one does give you 2 life. So it's probably if you have a choice, obviously the better one to blink. Now you have this one, the Empyrean Eagle, which pumps up your creatures. Migratory Route, which is just allows you to make a bunch of tokens. It's a sorcery. So it does have some limitations, but the big effect on here is that you can basic land cycle. So it allows you to, in the early game, if you're maybe stuck on land, you can just cycle this away, get your basics, and get your game plan going. Mist Meadow Witch is an awesome card. This is originally from Shadowmoor. So this has a tacked on ability to bounce, sorry, not bounce, but just flicker a creature back in and out of play. We get Soul Herder, so this is from Modern Horizons. So this one allows you to also exile another creature you control, but it does it at the beginning of your end step. So this one's not quite as good at saving your creatures, but if you just want to get the effect again, it does that. Plus it gets a +1 counter every time you do it. So it's awesome for that effect. And it looks like we have another Lord for creatures with flying. So it's another sub-theme. Arcane Signet has gladly become a staple. This was originally printed with the Throne of Eldraine Brawl decks, and where it was starting to become a little expensive. As you can see, the ability to add 1 mana, any color equal to your color identity for just 2 mana is a pretty good card, and of course, it's staple in the Commander format. Then we have our Azorius Signet, which is part of the Signet cycle, which is one of my favorites. Awesome cards. Burnished Heart. So this allows you to get 2 lands out of your deck. So again, a little bit of ramp. Commander Sphere, another card that's kind of considered a staple in some archetypes, just because it allows you to add a mana equal to your commander's identity. So regardless of deck you're playing, you know, as long as it's probably not monocolored, anything that has more than 2 colors is probably a great card to include, because at worst you can always play it and then sacrifice it, draw a card. We have Marble Diamond, so another card that allows you to add mana. So this one I would say is not as good as a Signet, because it only adds 1 mana and you can't use it right away unlike a Signet. Then we have Meteor Golem, so this is another great creature to blink out because it destroys a non-land permanent. We have Mind Stone, another great accelerator that allows you to cycle it later in the game to draw a card. And we have one of our new cards, so this is Cosmic Intervention. So if a permanent you control be put into the graveyard from the battlefield this turn, exile instead, return to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And it has Foretell, so Kind of everything this deck wants to do wrapped up in one sweet card. And another new card. So this is Hero Bredegard. So when you exile one or more cards from your hand and are permanents from the battlefield, you may put that many counters on it. So every time you exile one of these creatures and blink it back, whoops, that new card stock for you, it gets bigger. And then as long as it has 5 or more counters, it becomes an angel. And then if it has 10 or more counters on it, it's indestructible god. So this is kind of another way to kind of do that figure destiny style of leveling up your creature until it becomes huge. So all in all, pretty awesome card, especially in this deck. And then we have Stoic Farmer. So this enters the battlefield, choose your library for planes, reveal it. If an opponent controls more lands than you, put it on the battlefield tapped, otherwise put it into your hand. And it has Foretell. So it works well with the commander because it allows you to foretell it for 0. And it also allows you to ramp. And if you're ahead, it doesn't necessarily keep you ahead, but it does put it into your hand. So it does still help you either way. And then another new card. So we have Sage of the Beyond. So this one is a pretty good flyer, so 5/5 flyer. And spells you cast from anywhere other than your hand cost 2 less. So it allows you to then, if you have cards that are foretold, in exile to cast them cheaper. And then we have another new card. So this is Spectral Deluge. So return each creature your opponent controls with toughness X or less to his owner's hand, where X is the number of islands you control. So what's nice about this is this only affects your opponent. So it is pretty cool. Now it does work a little bit against the deck, and the fact that a lot of the cards want to fetch out planes. So this is maybe something you can maybe change a little bit with the deck. Maybe add some more islands depending on what the mix is. But it is nice because it does have Foretell again. And we have another new card. Now this card I believe is in some of the other supplemental product for the set. So not necessarily exclusive to this. But again, a card that may not necessarily easy to find. So this is a Cert Land Elementalist. So additional cost to cast from your hand, reveal a giant card or pay 2. So if you don't have a giant, it's going to cost you 9 mana. So when it attacks, you may cast an instant or sorcery from your hand without paying its mana cost. So this for sure is definitely an awesome build around card because there's some great sorceries that are really expensive you can put in your hand, in your deck, sorry, that if you have them in your hand, you can then cast them for free. So almost like a build around on its own. And then one of the other exclusive cards of this deck is Tales of the Ancestors. So each player with fewer cards in hand than the player with the most cards in hand draws cards equal to the difference. So this one might be a little bit hard to understand. It's one of those cards you have to read a few times to make sure you're playing it right. But the ability to draw a bunch of cards, multiple cards for a cheap investment, especially if you foretell it ahead of time and maybe you do have the commander out, so it's a 0 to foretell. It's pretty cool. And our last new card, we have Ethereal Valkyrie. So a 4/4 for 6 flyer. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, draw a card, then exile a card from your hand face down and becomes foretold. So this is really awesome. If you've played any with the new demon from Kaldheim, you'll know how the ability to just give any card foretell is pretty awesome. And it allows you to kind of ramp on its own. And I believe we're at the point where we're going to get some reprints and rares. So we have Angel of Finality. So it enters the battlefield, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. So this isn't necessarily a card that you're going to notice right away. It might be good, but if you're playing against somebody that has this graveyard synergies, card you're definitely going to want. And again, you can flicker it out, so it works really well. Angel of Serenity is a really strong card because it allows you to exile a bunch of stuff, and then if it leaves play, it goes back to their hand. So what's nice is that it doesn't go right back into play. They have to then cast it. Again, you can flicker it if you want, and you won't be able to snag the cards again, but you can maybe snag some new cards. We have Cleansing Nova, which is a great wrath effect, so it gives you some choice in whether to hit artifacts, enchantments, or creatures. Area Interlude, another card that allows you to exile multiple permanents. Geist Honored Monk, so kind of like our Cloud Goat Ranger, where it makes a bunch of tokens when it comes into play. So again, a prime target to flicker out. Marshal's Anthem, so a great multi-kicker card, and that allows you to return creatures from the battlefield. So again, it fits in that theme of getting more of these spell-like effects off your creatures if you can multi-kick it a bunch of times, which in this deck, as you've seen, there's a lot of ways to ramp, so it's very nice that you can do that. We have Restoration Angel, so this is new art on it. So Restoration Angel was a staple back when it was printed in Navison Restored in, when it was in Standard. And again, this one is pretty awesome. Now it does have that non-angel clause on it, which at the time wasn't really a drawback. But as you remember a couple cards ago, we saw the angel in Exile Graveyard. So it does have a little bit of issues with that. But for the most part, all the creatures you're going to want to be blinking out are going to be not angels. So that shouldn't really come up too often. Stormherd is an interesting card and probably one that you might want to replace. It just makes a bunch of tokens. Sun Titan is always a classic card, and that allows you to rebuy any permanent with cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So if you do even like place on those mana rocks, you can sacrifice it, draw a card, then you get it back with Sun Titan. Like little synergies like that, which are really nice. Even if you have nothing that you really want to bring back, having those cards in the deck always gives you something that you can get some advantage out of. We have Arcane Artisan. So it has an activated ability where you draw a card, then exile a card from your hand. If it's a creature exiled this way, that player creates a token that's a copy of it. When it leaves the battlefield, exile all tokens with it at the beginning of the next end step. So it allows you to kind of take advantage of some effects again by making copies of them. Curse of Swine is a great effect in blue that allows you to get rid of a bunch of creatures and to make boars instead. So it allows you to turn maybe they're really strong, giant creatures into just measly 2/2 boars. And we have Day of the Dragon. So this is a Scourge reprint that again turns all your creatures into 5/5 dragons. Now the downside to this is that you don't get a choice because it's exiling all creatures you control. So it can be a little bit tough sometimes, but generally speaking, if you're making a bunch of 5/5 dragons, you're probably okay with it. And then it does have the clause too. When this leaves the battlefield, you get all the creatures back. So it is nice in that you, again, if you have a bunch of effects that trigger when they enter the battlefield, they'll trigger again when this goes away. Then we have Inspired Sphinx. So enters the battlefield, draw a card equal to the number of opponents you have. So obviously a card that's very good in Commander. We have Synthetic Destiny. So exile all creatures you control at the beginning of next end step. Reveal a card on top of your library until you reveal that many creature cards. Put them on the battlefield, and then shuffle the rest of the cards. So this allows you to take like your tokens, for instance, and then turn them into real cards. So pretty cool effect. And then we get Brago, King Eternal. So when this deals combat damage to a player, exile a number of target non-land permanents you control, return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. So he kind of allows you to do a massive blink, flicker effect with all your cards. So in this deck, he's clearly awesome. And then we have some more mana rocks. I don't know why they're positioned at this part in the deck. Soul Ring, which is clearly a staple in every Commander deck at this point. Swiftfoot Boots, which again is another staple. And then we get into the lands, so we get a good variety you can see here. We get Command Tower, which is obviously one of the best lands. A bunch of nice dual lands we have here. Not going to go over all these, but you can see then we have a ton of basic lands. And we get to a few more cards. So this looks like this is the Kaldheim section of the pack. So we get some more Foretell cards. So we'll just fly through these. So you can see, I was wondering where all the Foretell cards were in this pack. So they do give you some good ones too, like Saw It Coming. It was a good counterspell. And then we have Nico Defies Destiny, Vega the Watcher, Replicating Ring. And then we have Gates and Glacial Floodplain. And then we get into our tokens. So we have a bunch of Thopters, Spirits, Pegasus, more Spirits, Soldiers, and we flip them over. And we get Birds for our Raisin form, Birds, Kithkin Soldiers, and Boars to give our opponents, along with Replicating Ring and a Dragon. So it's a shame you only get one Dragon, because hopefully you're going to be making more with Day of the Dragon. Oops. And then lastly, they give us a card that talks about what to do on your turn. So again, if you're new to the game. So that was the blue-white deck, the Foretell one. So now I'm just going to go over our other deck, and the one that, if I was had a choice between these two, I would easily take the Elven Empire. This is our black-green deck, and we get Lathril, Blade of Elves. So this is a 2/3 menace, and when it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior tokens, which is fine. Menace helps get through, and then the big effect though is you can tap 10 untapped elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life, and you gain 10 life. So again, 100 card deck with 8 new cards. We get a deck box, or 10-sided tokens, life wheel, strategy insert, and reference card. So let's take a look at this one. Do a better job of opening it up. Get all fancy here. Getting that little perforations at the top, which, as you can see, aren't really working for me here. So we're just going to do it the old-fashioned way and just rip and tear till it comes up. One annoying thing is how this has that gap there. It makes it kind of harder. So I'm just going to go ham on that box. There you go. We're not getting too fancy here. Okay, so here's our little insert again. A little underwhelming, but whatever. Okay, so we have our deck. And then we have our box again. So I do like the art on the box. It's a shame you couldn't get like maybe a sturdier plastic version of it, or buy one, and then we get our cool spin down life total there. All right, so onto the deck. So I already talked about the commander. Now, this one is good if you have somebody that maybe has been playing for a little bit, because the Elf tribe has been featured in a few different blocks over Magic's time. Thinking off the top of my head, I know like Onslaught was the original tribal set, and that featured Elves. So you have like 3 sets there that have a bunch of tribal cards for Elves. You also have Lorwyn had a heavy Elf theme with a bunch of cards that would care about Elves. Now Lorwyn was more, I'd say, constructed focused. Like a lot of the better Elves were cheaper and efficient, so you may not have a lot in that set. But there's stuff like Impervious Perfect, which might even be in this deck, which are just good old-fashioned Elf Lords. So you do have a lot of options. And if you go all the way back to like Alpha Beta, you have some Elf cards like Llanowar Elves. Elvish Champion is another card that got reprinted later in Invasion, which is a good, it's one of the original Lords there. So I'll show you the Commander card again. And it's nice because it gives green-black kind of a more dedicated Elf tribal leader. They did have Nath from Lorwyn, but he wasn't necessarily a card that cared. He made Elves and discarded cards from your opponent's hand, but he didn't have this kind of devastating effect like this card has. So let's just get right to it. So we have Ambition's Cost. So I believe this was a Portal 3 Kingdoms card, which would make sense given the ability there. Or ability, the text there. So you draw 3 cards, lose 3 life. So just a nice way to refill your hand, which is great in these kind of decks. So here we have Eyeblight Colors. So when it dies, create 3 1/1 Elves, and then mill 3. So it allows you to fill your board with Elves. That's one thing Elves is good at, is making tokens. So here you got Eyeblight Massacre. So this was in one of the more recent sets. So this gives all non-Elves -2/2. Lies Alana Scarblade. So this allows you to kill stuff based on the number of Elves you control. But the cost is you have to discard an Elf. So it does have a bit of a downside, but the effect is very strong. So Miara, Thorn of Glades. So when it or another Elf you control dies, you may pay 1 and 1 life if you do draw a card. So this was in one of the more recent sets as well. So here's Pride of the Perfect. So Elves you control get +2/+0. So again, you know, one of the more recent sets was Commander Legends, I believe, that those were printed in. So here's another older one. So Prowess of the Fair. So whenever Elf, non-token Elf is put into graveyard from the battlefield, you may create a 1/1 green Elf Warrior token. So you notice that it says non-token Elf because, of course, a lot of these cards make Elves. So here's one of the stable Elves. So Elvish Mystic. So any ones that add 1 mana for 1. Elvish Promenade. Just creates a bunch of basically doubles the number of Elves you control. So it allows you to make a bunch of tokens. Elvish Rejuvenator is kind of a new way of doing them designing ways to get lands. And in this case, you look at the top 5 instead of just searching your deck. But still allows you to get any land, so which is nice because usually those effects only get you a basic land. So I like that card. Firehaven Elves, again, like another Elvish Rejuvenator that allows you to search for a basic land. Then we have Jagged Scar Elves. So this is good if you're worried about creatures with flying because they allow you to shoot them down. And the power totals equals the number of Elves you control. So if you do have a bunch of Elf tokens, they get quite large. Llanowar Tribes is a Modern Horizon card where essentially it stapled 3 Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystics, whatever you want to call them, together. So you literally have a 3/3 for 3 that adds triple green. So this card can quickly, very quickly generate a lot of mana for you. Lies Lana Huntmaster is a great card in this deck because whenever you cast an Elf spell, because back in Lorwyn they did have tribal sorceries, tribal instants, all these kind of cards. So that's why it says spell. But generally speaking, you're talking about elf creatures. Now, if you do look, you can see on Prowess of the Fair, you can see that it is a tribal enchantment elf. So there are some cards in this deck that will trigger it. But anyways, the goal though is every time you cast an elf, you get another elf. So this card is very strong in the deck because you can generate a lot of tokens quickly. Here you go, Null Mage Shepherd. So this isn't necessarily an elf card, but it is an elf creature type. So it allows you to destroy artifacts and enchantments. So this one was from the original Ravnica. And in Commander, this effect is just awesome, right? Gives you something to do with all those tokens. So we have Numa, Gerard Chieftain. So to be in combat on your turn, you may pay XX, where X, when you do distribute X counters among any number of target elves, and it's a partner. So you can see this is a card made for our commander. And then we get a staple of Reclamation Sage, so just straight up destroying artifacts or enchantments. Spring Bloom Elf, Druid, is a Modern Horizons card that replicates the card Harrow, and then allows you to sacrifice land to go and get 2 basic lands. All right, so now we have Sylvan Messenger. So this is one of the old school cards that allows you to reveal the top 4 and get any elf cards in this way into your hand. So obviously you want to play as many elves as possible to maximize that effect. Timberwatch Elf is a surprisingly strong card, especially in a deck like this where you're making so many elf tokens, just to be able to give any creature +X, where X is the number of elves you control out of the blue is very, it's pretty gross when you just attack with a bunch of creatures and your opponent has to block, assuming that you can put this effect on any of the creatures. So a very strong elf. Voice of Many. So you draw cards for each opponent who controls fewer creatures than you. So obviously you want to play a bunch of creatures, which this deck can do very easily. And it's an elf again. Wirewood Channeler is kind of an unassuming card. This has a lot of combo potential with anything that allows you to untap it. So maybe not necessarily in this this deck, but if you end up playing kind of a deck that has access to blue mana, and I know there's a lot of effects that allow you to pay a mana and then untap it. And as soon as you get a certain number of elves, this can generate a lot of mana. So it has combo potential, but in this deck, it also just can generate a ton of mana out of nowhere. All right, we get Wood Elves, so it looks like it has new art. I know Wood Elves has gone through many iterations. It's kind of a classic card. Again, just one that allows you to search for a forest card and put it on the battlefield and shuffle your library. So the one thing that's different than some of the other versions of this effect is this just says forest card. So if you have, let's say, like an overgrown tomb, the shock land, you can grab it with this card, which makes it really nice and probably one of the best of this effect, especially in this deck, because you can go get, overgrown tomb, you can go get like a bayou, anything that's a forest. It doesn't necessarily have to be a basic forest that you can go get and put into play with this. So we have another new card from Commander Legends, so Abomination of Lanalore. So just a big elf, depending on, hopefully you have a board set up. Golgari Finebroker is from one of the newer Ravnica sets. So it just allows you to return a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. So just a solid card. Then we had Moldavine Reclamation. So whenever creature control dies, gain a life and draw a card. So if you do have all these tokens you've been making over the course of the game and your opponent goes to board wipe, this allows you to just recover a bunch of cards. So hopefully you can get the train going. Maybe you do find a Golgari Finebroker, and that allows you to buy back some more of your elves that you lost, or just draw a bunch of new elves to play. Okay, we have Poison Tip Archer. So this is one of those unassuming creatures kind of, because it is a 2/3 reach Death Touch. Not necessarily the strongest one, but when another creature you control dies, each opponent loses life. So this can get very annoying. And it's almost one of those cards where it's almost too annoying that it may make you the target of your opponent's attack. So hopefully, they'll kind of assume it's just not going to do much and just leave you alone, let you build up your elves, and then maybe somebody board wipes, and then each opponent's going to take a ton of damage from it. All right, and then we have a staple, Putrefy. So this is originally from the original Ravnica City of Guild set. It's been a staple as long as it's been around. Very nice. It also has that can't be regenerated clause, which doesn't come up too often, but when it does, it's pretty nice. And one of the strongest elves in the deck is Shaman of the Pack. So when it enters the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. So this is the one that you want to keep bringing back to your hand. So if you have ways to return it to your hand from the graveyard, this is the card you want to bring back just because the effect is so devastating. Wipe out an opponent in one play with this. Now here's one of the new cards. So this is Pact of the Serpent. So choose a creature type. In this deck, you're obviously going to choose elves. So target player draws X cards and loses the X life, where X is the number of creatures of the chosen type. So one thing that's interesting about this kind of effect is, you know, obviously you can target yourself and draw a bunch of cards with it. You know, especially in the early game when you want to kind of refill your hand if you played a bunch of elves. Very nice to do. But the nice thing about this, because it's target player, in the late game you can use it to straight up just kill an opponent. You know, if you have like 10 elves in play, you can just make a player lose 10 life out of nowhere. So very nice. Here's another card. We get Ruthless Winner. So at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a non-elf creature. So obviously if you have no non-elves, as in this deck, then you're fine. So again, a really synergistic card, very nice. Here is another new card. We get Serpent's Soul Jar. So an elf you control dies, exile it, and then you can pay 2 life until end of turn you may cast a creature spell from among cards exiled with Serpent's Soul Jar. So this seems extremely strong cards like Shaman of the Pack, where if it goes away, you can just bring it back with this. So I love that card. Another new card, Bounding of Skemfar. So it reveals the top 6. You may put a land from among them onto the battlefield, tap, and an elf card into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in random order. So very strong, and that allows you to ramp while also drawing you an elf card. And obviously in this deck, you're probably going to have options when it comes to the elf that you want to put in your hand. So again, another really strong card for this deck. And we get another card that is from Kaldheim. Again, I believe this is not from exclusive to the commander deck, but it is one of the other products. I think it's one of the specific boosters, probably the green booster you can get. This is just a good old-fashioned Lord. So it gives your and the Lord, of course, is a creature that gives your other creatures of the same type +1/+1. And it's also nice because it allows you to add triple green. So maybe not the best Lord in terms of the efficiency of the mana cost. You know, we'll see if there's any of the other higher ranking ones. I'm sure there are in this deck. But again, it's just nice to have multiples of ones just because the ability to give all your tokens +1/+1 is very strong. And this is also most likely a creature you're not going to want to send into combat. So the fact that you can just use it still without having to just have it sit there and do nothing is nice. We get Crown of Skemfar, so another new card. So it gives a creature +1/+1 for each elf you control and reach. So, you know, one of the things this deck does not have as many creatures that can block flyers. So it allows you to do that. And you can pay 3 mana, return it from your graveyard to your hand. So if you put it on a token and the token dies, no biggie, just pay 3 mana, bring it back to your hand, the next turn recast it. We get another new card, Wolverine Rider. So at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1. Each upkeep, create a 1/1 green elf warrior token, and whenever the elf enters the battlefield you control, you gain life equal to its toughness. Hot damn, that is a nice card. Not only does it trigger at the beginning of each upkeep, not just yours. So if you are playing with four players in total, you're going to get 3 tokens before it's your turn. And it gives you more life, so it allows you to stay in the game longer. So awesome, excellent card. We have Elderfang Venom. So attacking elves you control have Death Touch. So that's pretty sweet. And whenever elf you control dies, each opponent loses life and you gain a life. So again, this theme of making a bunch of tokens, and then if your opponent has to deal with them either by blocking them, they're going to lose their creatures they're blocking, or if they just wrath the board, they're going to lose a ton of life from this. And it's each opponent. So again, it incentivizes nobody to attack you or to destroy your board. So this is one of the great new cards, I think, in this deck. So far, I've been really impressed with the new cards that they presented in this deck. Beast Whisperer is another newer card from the Ravnica block. I guess it's not block anymore, the Ravnica sets. Gives you a card anytime you cast a creature spell. So this is nice because it also goes in decks that aren't necessarily elf-based decks. So any deck that's more heavily creature-based. So this is a nice one to get just in general. And it just so happens, though, to be an elf. Cultivator of Blades is a pretty sweet one, especially with all these effects that allow you to pump. So if you do put, like, let's say, the Crown of Skemfar on this, you can attack, and then each other attacking creature gets +X/+X, where X is a Cultivator of Blades power. And it does make 2 tokens. Now the tokens aren't elves, they are servos, but still being able to make more attackers, if this gets +5/+5 or something crazy like that, imagine your whole team getting that when this attacks. So this is a card that came out back in Kaladesh, and it was kind of unassuming. I remember they made a promo of it. I wasn't really too impressed, but I started playing it in certain decks like Standard and whatnot, where you can kind of take advantage of it, and it gets to be really silly. Like, there's some cards that allow you to return creatures, and this just does a really good job of taking advantage of the fact that it can get pumped. So here's one of the core set lords. So this just 3/4 reach. Other elves you control get ++1, and then when it attacks, you gain a life for each attacking elf you control. So just a nice little life gain attached to a lord effect. Elvish Archdruid. So this is one of the best lords. It looks like it has new artwork in this set. So it's very similar to the one that we saw earlier, except that instead of just adding 3 green, it adds 1 for each elf you control. So in certain situations, the other one's going to be better, maybe when you're rebuilding your board. But if you're curving out, this one is going to be really awesome because it allows you to generate a ton of mana. And you can also use your mana of the turn. After you played this, play a couple more cheaper elves, and then instantly get the effect from playing those elves by being able to use this for more green mana. So I can't say enough good things about Elvish Archdruid. So next we have Enray's Forerunners. So this is kind of one of the ways that you can win the game. So this allows you to kind of overrun your opponent. So once you do, again, have all those little tokens running around, little elves that maybe not are big enough to attack through your opponent, you can play Forerunners, and then they all get +2, Vigilance, and Trample until end of turn. Plus you get the big pig as well. So awesome card. Harvest Seasons is just a good ramp card because it allows you to search your life for X basic land cards, where X is the number of tapped creatures you control, and put those cards on the battlefield tapped. So just a good way to ramp. So a card I mentioned earlier from Lorwyn, Impervious Perfect. So this one is a Lord, but this one allows you to also make an elf every turn. So again, the theme of not having to put your Lords into combat, where they potentially can get blocked, or something, you know, like a flash creature can come out to take it out. You know, the ability to have it stay at home while also getting you know, something kind of effect out of it is awesome. One of the newer ones from Dominaria is Marwin the Nurturer. So it gets bigger every time you play another elf. And again, this one though, if you look at the ability, it's when another elf enters the battlefield. So it doesn't have to be cast like some of the other cards in the deck. So if you are making tokens from things, they add to this. And this one is also like the Archdruid in that it can add a large amount of green mana if you played a bunch of elves. All right, and we have Mass Admirers, which is just another good elf card. It's probably one I think you could probably replace if you find some better ones. It does draw you a card, and it's 3/2, and then if you do cast a creature spell, you can pay 2 to return to your hand, but that is kind of an expensive effect. So I would say this is probably one of the cards you can take out. Rides the Exile, or Reese the Exile. So whenever it attacks, you gain 1 life for each attacking elf you control, and then you can pay a black, sacrifice it, and regenerate Reese. So the one thing that's nice, again, like we saw with the Serpent Soul Jar, is that we can use this to sacrifice creatures we want and then recast them with the Soul Jar later in the turn. So there is a little bit of synergy here with the sacrifice effect, which is nice. We have Voice of the Woods. So this is an Onslaught classic, so it allows you to tap 5 elves to make a 7/7 trampler. So, you know, the body isn't great, 2/2 for 5, but the ability to turn your elves, including this elf. So, and because it's not a tap symbol, we can use it right away. So if you have 4 other elves, boom, bang, make a 7/7 trampler. And we have just a great spell, especially in Commander, Casualties of War. The one thing that's really nice about this effect, because I have done things like this before, but it's choose 1 or more. So you're not restricted, because if it didn't have or more, that whole top line, if it just had all those effects, we'd have to have all those in play. But because it says choose 1 or more, if we just, you know, want to destroy a creature in a land, we can. Or if there's no, you know, there's no planeswalkers or artifacts or something in play, we can still cast this card, which those other previous cards you wouldn't be able to, because you need to have legal targets. All right, next we have Twin Blade Assassins. So at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, draw a card. So kind of expensive, 5 mana. The body's okay, but it's not great. And again, probably a card I would suggest you get cut out of this deck. We have Arcane Signet, so just another staple. As a Soul Ring, and then we get Command Tower, and then just a bunch of black-green producing lands. A lot of them come into play tapped, add mana to your mana pool of either color, and then we get all of our basic lands, and then we get our force. So hopefully we'll see some of the cards from Kaldheim at the back. All right, so here's some of our cards in the back. So when this dies, return another target elf from your graveyard to your hand. So that fixed that theme of bringing back your better elves. Just a good removal spell and Poison the Cup. I would say this is another card you could probably cut for something better. Return Upon the Tide. So this returns target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. If it's an elf, create 2 1/1 tokens, and it's got Foretell. So pretty sweet in this deck. So there's another card that cares about creatures of a certain type. You know, and it is an elf again. We have Tergrid's Shadow. So each player sacrifices 2 creatures. So a lot of these, I would say you can probably cut and find something better. You know, another Elvish Promenade ability, so I'll create a 1/1 elf for each token for each elf you control. The nice thing about this one though is it is an instant, so that does give you some more utility with it. Despair Sentinel's pretty weak. I think you could play like Landlore Elves or something and be obviously much better. There's also stuff like Elves of Deep Shadow from Lauren. I think it's, no, it's not Lauren. There is a Ravnica block, that's what it is. That would do a much better job. Do have Roots of Wisdom, so mills 3, returns a land or an elf from your graveyard to your hand. So I like the flexibility of this one. And if you can't, you draw a card. So probably not going to happen in this deck. Binding the Old Gods is just a really good multi-purpose removal spell. That's plus it has some ramp tacked onto it. And then the Death Touch, you know, is just nice at the end, not necessarily something you would play it for. And then we get Herald, King of Skemfar. So this is kind of like the Sylvan Messenger, where it looks at the top 5. You get an elf or warrior or Tyvar card from among them and put it into your hand. So Tyvar is not in this deck, but he is an excellent planeswalker that works really well with elves. So probably one of the upgrades you want to put into this deck. And then we get our Skemfar land. And then, as you can imagine, there's going to be a wide variety of tokens. I'm guessing all the backs of these, there's some servos, are all going to be elves, and I was correct. A little disappointed they're all Kaldheim elves, but I guess they wanted to keep it that way. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed looking at the new decks that came out. Again, I would probably pick this deck, but I think the other deck also, you know, has a lot of awesome synergies. You know, I'm a huge Momentary Blink fan, so I think it allows you to kind of take advantage of creatures that have those spells attached to them. Is awesome. So, if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe if you are a big fan. I'm going to be having more content coming out. Hopefully, again, the plan is to have something come out once a week. So, thank you for watching, and bye.